Good morning, good evening, depending on where you're located, and welcome to the 2020 National Government Executive Forum sponsored by Esri. My name is Randall Billy, and I'll be your host for this morning, as well as my associate Nick Land out of our UK team. We want to thank everyone for coming together. Usually our NGEF, which we shorten the abbreviation, is associated with our annual user conference in San Diego, and obviously we are all dealing with different times with the pandemic and adapting as best we can. And so we decided to separate the NGEF from the user conference and give people opportunity to come together in this virtual environment in the fall. So I want to thank everyone for joining us, and I promise to try to keep this to about 3 hours to be respectful of your time. Typically, we bring everyone together. They represent senior executives from our authoritative data customers. These are the mapping and charting agencies, the official statistics, our land cadastre organizations. And we come together because we have a common interest in promoting the use of authoritative data within government to promote, better decision making and to improve the lives of citizens. One of the big aspects of the NGEF is always the community and the networking. So we're obviously have to deal with some limitations for that this year, but I think we've brought together a phenomenal group of speakers to share with you their real-world experiences on, implementing enterprise GIS and working towards national spatial data infrastructure. So I'm going to just take a quick moment, do some housekeeping, and walk you through the agenda for the next 3 hours. So Jack Dangermond has provided an introduction for us that will kick off the morning. And then first keynote will be from Dr. Rachel Snow from the UN, followed by 2 expert panels. These are panel members that represent your peers, senior executives within government that are working day in and day out to implement, location intelligence within their organizations as well as all throughout government. And then we've invited Andy Coote, who is a well-known and experienced consultant, to give us a final picture on some real-world examples of implementing the country action plans associated with the IGIF. So first off, I want to thank you. Just moving ahead, a little bit of housekeeping. So we're going to have a mix of live presentations as well as recorded videos. And I will promise you that all the speakers are online with us. We'll have a Q&A afterwards, and hopefully we'll elicit some good interest and questions from our audience. I ask you to use the question chat box to post your questions for the speakers as they work through either their live presentation or the video, and then we will consolidate them, and either myself or my associate Nick Land will moderate the questions with the speakers. All of the presentation material and the videos will be available post-forum for you to download and potentially share with your compatriots. So first, I'd like to allow our founder and owner, Jack Dangermond, a few minutes to kick off the proceedings. And most of you are well aware that Jack Dangermond founded Esri 50 years ago, and he's the driving force behind the commercial GIS movement. So please stand by for Mr. Dangermond.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Jack Dangermond, and I have the great privilege of welcoming all of you here to this executive forum all about national initiatives to build a better foundation for rational government and good decision-making in each of your respective countries. You, as a group, are a special group, as you know. Collectively, you are a kind of network of people who actually know how to build and manage foundational agencies that support your various countries. And so the purpose of this meeting started some years ago, almost a decade ago, with a vision of how can we interconnect and share knowledge, what's happening in this country shared with what's happening in that country, and learn about the new technologies, learn about what's happening. So in these next few hours, the agenda is really going to be rich, sharing person to person, agency to agency, and creating a better understanding. So I welcome you and wish that we were all in one room so we could get to know each other better. But you know, the story with COVID has made that impossible. But we're going to do our best job. Your work is incredibly valuable in each respective country. You're working basically on addressing all the national challenges in each country, building a kind of infrastructure for rational government. And this is so important in these troubling times. I assembled just a few examples of this work to share with you. You're working on building land information systems and managing this information, the cadastre, entitlements, exchange of properties. This is a foundation for a civil society. These few examples show not just the boundaries of maps, but how to exploit that data for various kinds of policy and understanding reasons. Many of you are collecting statistical data, national censuses and demographic information, and applying it and using it in various meaningful ways. Others of you are looking at public health information and social equity, the issues of taking census understanding and seeing how it shows patterns of relationships in society, and that for policy people is enormously valuable. These maps show disease spread, like the COVID map in the dashboard up in the upper left by John Hopkins, but we can look at everything from African swine flu to malaria transmission to poverty drivers, for example. And then look at this interesting map about the coordinated response in Lithuania to COVID. It's a rich goldmine, really, of information that you collect that can help, in a transparent way, a population respond better to various issues. Now, this slide shows the rich work that you're doing in national mapping. All the different geospatial authorities, which you collectively represent, are looking at not just topographic maps, but nautical charting and special kinds of surveys with LiDAR and new imagery and new image maps. I mean, it's just a rich plethora of information, again, providing the foundation for society at many different levels. In recent years, GIS technology has opened up ways for us to develop portals which interconnect data from different agencies and make them available and share them. These are just a few examples of your work in various countries around the world. This is not just happening in national government, but also state government and local government, and at the other scale, the entire world with efforts by the UN and various agencies. In our work, in your work, I might say, GIS is showing up to be a strong and powerful force for interconnecting things. I would say abstractly interconnecting our world. This was thought about years ago, the idea of the internet is interconnecting our world, and it certainly did. And before that, telephones, and before that, telegraphs, and those sorts of things. But this is a step change of interconnecting our world, because on these networks is living geographic science data that allows us to not only interconnect, but also integrate our knowledge in various ways. It's interconnecting people and organizations and sciences and information using location as a kind of common key. There's simply no question that today our world is in trouble. If we look at environmental degradation and social instability, there are so many uncertain areas that are affecting our societies, and it's all interconnected. What happens here affects what's happening there. A loss of biodiversity, the COVID disaster, loss of nature, overpopulation of our entire planet, issues of resource allocation like water and other resource shortages of many types. Addressing these kinds of challenges are going to be well, we'll work on them for the rest of our lives. And your agencies particularly are front and center as providing the fabric and the foundation for this. Geography, the science of our world, and GIS, the digital manifestation of geographic thinking, is a technology that allows things to be integrated. GIS is a way to interconnect things. It provides us a process for linking, for example, all of your measurements to map making and then to spatial analysis, where we overlay and integrate information. It's a way to interconnect and a process and a framework for doing planning, resource planning, urban planning, national planning, economic development planning of various types. And the visual nature of what you do in the way of mapping is a perfect foundation for things like decision makers to be able to understand and make decisions and action. So, ladies and gentlemen, this group of people, you are very special because you are working on building a kind of geospatial infrastructure, taking the world, creating a digital twin in your various countries, and then making it available for so many decisions and activities going on. In this conference, we're talking really about spatial infrastructure or geospatial infrastructure. There's many names for this, but today, a modern GIS technology allows us to support these sorts of activities with a new, we call it geospatial infrastructure name. It supports individuals who can connect to the infrastructure and use it. It supports teaming and whole departments and even whole organizations, and now even whole communities of organizations to be able to collaborate, to share, and to understand. Some of my colleagues call this GIS at scale. And the idea is using web services to interconnect different distributed data sets and bring them together dynamically to be able to understand things, to be able to make more societal level decision making on this infrastructure. Now, geospatial infrastructure actually interconnects three kinds of systems. Actually, GIS itself does. Systems of record, like cadastral records or topographic map records or water records or statistical records, with systems of insight, being able to do spatial analysis, like business intelligence does, but spatial business intelligence. And then it also supports this idea of a system of engagement, interconnecting individuals through the magic and language of mapping and spatial tools. All three of these kinds of systems are really one system, and increasingly this one system is being fed by real-time information from either satellites or from ground sensors or IoT sorts of information. Very rich. So geospatial infrastructure, if we can name it like that, is advancing rapidly. And these are just a handful of the many forces that are working synergistically in building and supporting your kind of work. Real-time information tracking, big spatial analysis work, geo AI and machine learning tools, smarter tools for automatic generation of maps, the idea of building whole enterprises of information, not just the GIS department. It's leveraging the power of location to bring it all together. And increasingly, we're seeing infrastructure move to the cloud and interconnect separate systems into these networks of systems or systems of systems. And this integration, ladies and gentlemen, is transforming organizations around the world. It integrates all types of data, not just traditional map data, but also real-time data and the new generation of LiDAR and point clouds and multi-dimension data and real-time, well, all of it can come together through normalizing spatial data and making it available through these portals, just like what you're doing. Geospatial infrastructure, that is the interconnection of different systems, is emerging really rapidly. This diagram basically shows this notion of having lots of separate systems that can interconnect across the web and through the cloud. These interconnections, again, empower individuals, but they also allow us to imagine new ways of approaching some of these complex multidisciplinary problems. And you, again, as the providers of national information agencies, are beginning to stand up to not just continue your measurement, but apply these measurements in various analytic and interconnected ways. GIS maps and dashboards are becoming pervasive, as we saw with the dashboard of Corona. It has now made over 1 trillion maps. This is kind of hard to believe in just 6 months. But that's just an example. There are trillions of maps being viewed around the world now from different distributed services and brought together. And these are supporting a new language for policy making and decision makers. Apps, where maps live inside of, are also delivering capabilities not just in a browser, but also on devices that we can take to the field and apply in various ways. Not just to access the infrastructure, but also to collect data to be able to feed the infrastructure. And at the core, analytics, spatial modeling, is allowing us to look at spatial temporal combinations in volumes like the new voxel visualization tools and analytic tools. And the integration of AI and machine learning is taking these data sets and allow us to create new insights to be able to brief and tell people through story maps and mapping. In other words, leveraging from a science perspective all of the foundational data plus information that you're creating. And organizations are now, because of the nature of infrastructure's architecture, are beginning to collaborate. Let's look at these examples. In the upper left, we have one of the largest utilities in the United States working with state and local governments, sharing their utility data and outage data, and in turn, those agencies are sharing their data to the utility, dynamically across the web. In the lower left, the idea of organizing sustainability, a big vision of the UN, by interconnecting the little systems into a system of systems that tell us about the SDGs. More about that later. The city of Abu Dhabi is applying it. The Canadian government and different provinces in Canada are beginning to openly share their information as services so that they can leverage each other. GIS hubs, a new and rapidly emerging technology, is transforming whole communities of participants. This is interconnecting people with identities that can have access to these sorts of utility information sets with maps and apps, and it allows two-way communication. The whole community can get involved in collecting data like citizen science information. And this will transform national mapping agencies and survey agencies of various types. This kind of interconnection idea is the idea that citizens can become part of their government. As the world continues to become more democratic in nature, it means that mapping and geography provide the language for interconnecting. An example of this is, as I already mentioned, the SDG hub network that's emerging at the UN. And many of you here and listening in are participating in that, building systems in individual countries and sharing as services to create a global participation in seeing how the world is doing with respect to the SDGs. This means that we'll be able to have systematic reporting, not just for one country, but for the entire world, and thereby give us the power to see and communicate so we can create a more sustainable world. Addressing these big challenges is not just technology. And that's in some ways the easy part. But we are working on the technology to support it. The fact is that it takes understanding the problems. It takes collaborating, envisioning solutions using geographic information to help them come into being. It requires organizing all the work. And by the way, this is exactly what so many of you are skilled in doing. It also requires a sense of purpose, owning the responsibility in your country for leveraging the good work and the information that you're doing for good. It means creating these GIS organizations that you are doing, overseeing them in the right way. It also requires your personal leadership, and that's why I'm so thrilled at the opportunity to open this executive forum by just saying a few words to you. Now we're going to be shifting over to listening to real examples of real people doing things beyond just these abstractions that I've been talking about. But before leaving you, I'll simply talk about one more thing, which is about building the next generation. The future belongs to them, as we know, and building an educational platform in your countries where kids learn in school, K through 12 and higher ed, the power of geographic thinking and the tools in the form of GIS tools to be able to make them come alive is going to be essential. So I want to just say Esri is behind you. We're providing free grants for all K through 12 schools in the world to our cloud systems. And with National Geographic, our big partner, who is building curriculum with us to be able to get kids involved, millions of kids that can address these big challenges that we're facing. And your guidance, your assistance, your participation in this is very much appreciated. And also similarly at the higher ed, working with your universities. Helping students everywhere is going to be critical for us to create a more sustainable future. Well, ladies and gentlemen, again, enjoy the rest of the conference. And again, I so appreciate you connecting with us and working on this together. Thank you.
All right. So welcome back. I'd like to, on behalf of Jack Dangermond and Esri, thank you for joining us again. You know, we represent part of the national government sector at Esri, and it's our privilege to support you as a community. And as you've heard, you know, this is a mission that we all buy into. You know, we're very proud of what the world community is advancing towards reporting on the SDGs and improving the state of the global citizens. So now we're going to move into the bulk of our agenda. So as you heard from Jack, that was a little bit of the technology foundation. Now we're going to kind of move on towards really more purpose and implementation and policy a little bit. You know, we've been building technology solutions, really geospatial infrastructure, which Jack referred to, for the last 50 years. And over that time, we've evolved our approach to national spatial data infrastructure. And while the conventional wisdom states to start with the data, you know, today I want to start with the purpose. And this is where spatial data infrastructure comes in. You know, whether you call it SDI, one of our speakers calls it OneMap, others regional information systems, or national GIS. You know, they continue to be relevant and pervasive at all levels of government and across many sectors. You know, and we've been supporting SDI initiatives at the local level, the state, regional, national, and global scales. And we understand that SDIs are essential to fully realizing the potential of GIS and addressing critical world problems. And we are seeing new patterns develop, patterns that focus on collaboration and outreach and inclusiveness for everyone. So that's really where we want to start. You know, we want to acknowledge that your data has purpose. And, you know, you have to figure out as an organization who your data is serving. You know, is it to report on the progress of sustainability? Is it being collected with the intent of identifying and reducing crime, or lifting the underserved out of poverty? You know, I think at their finest, SDI enables cross-border, multi-organizational collaboration, you know, to address these challenges, whether they're environmental, they're, you know, and natural, or as we've all experienced recently, pandemics. You know, GIS has been at the forefront at supporting our response. And I think it's important to realize that, you know, it is the purpose in mind. So first and foremost, I think SDIs are about problem solving. It's not just about the data or data production, which many of you represent those organizations. So as we go forward and you listen to your peers, I want you to think about what problems are they solving and how does that relate to my organization's efforts.